Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com. The book, Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, came out in 2020 as a bestseller in 2021, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth followed, as well as Raised by These Wolves, How Family and Federal Courts Are Failing Our Children, another bestseller, and Raised by These Wolves, Volume 2, Child Trafficking Through the Foster Care and Court Systems, came out July 17th as a bestseller right out the gate. Please feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. I'm so happy to have my return guest on. I have Attorney Gary Dolan. The last time he was on was season 5, episode 144, and that was on August 1st of 2024. And we discussed the case of his broken career due to lies, perjury, and case fixing by the lawyers and judges that may cause him to be disbarred. And Attorney Gary Dolan began his career at the age of 50 years old. And it all started with a slip and fall case that involved forgery of a document with a physician's name on it. Other attorneys from Lubin and Meyers became involved in malpractice part of the case, but left Attorney Dolan with handling the slip and fall case. 16 judges involved in the slip and fall case, and that's where it all started. Both cases are still litigating at the present time. However, the case was fixed. So the slip and fall injured woman's case would never win. A forgery was planted with the physician's name in a document 6 months prior. There was also an incident where there was no trespass order that was verbally given, not written by a judge, so he couldn't enter the courthouse. And Attorney Gary went to the courthouse to retrieve documents, and he was not allowed to retrieve the documents and was arrested for trespassing. And please tell us, Attorney Gary, how are you doing? I mean, I know you had a hearing August 7th, and you were possibly going to be imprisoned for 90 days at taxpayer expense on an order that was never written. How are you?
Good, good. Nice to be back on your show again.
Glad to have you.
I'm pretty impressed that you remembered all that from the last time and wrote it all down.
Oh, yeah.
But uh, it wasn't a hearing on August 7th. It was
Okay.
an actual trial.
Okay.
I was actually arrested back in March 19th. I was arrested for trespassing at the courthouse because I was there trying to get evidence to help me, defend myself at the Board of Bar Overseers because they put me on trial. The Board of Bar Overseers is going to disbar me. So they had to give me a hearing first. And it was a 6-day show trial. And I got a cat that just things up. So halfway through the trial, they had one of the lawyers I'm going to mention here. He was lying through his teeth on the stand. And because the Board of Bar Overseers and the Bar Council wouldn't let me depose any of their witnesses before the trial, I couldn't catch him while he was testifying. So when he finished testifying, when the Bar Council asked him all the softball questions, it was my turn to cross-examine him. And I asked a couple of questions and they said, "Oh, it's time for lunch." And I'm standing there going, "Okay, I'll finish cross-examine after lunch." Well, they said, "Oh, he isn't coming back. He's going on vacation. So you're not going to get a chance to cross-examine him." And I just blew up and I said, "Okay, if he's not coming back, neither am I. This is a setup." They wouldn't allow me to depose their witnesses before my trial, my disbarment trial.
Mm-hmm.
They wouldn't let me get evidence. They barred me from getting any evidence. And now they're going to try to prevent me from deposing their star witness. So they said, "Okay, we'll bring him back in April and you can cross-examine him then." So I figured in the meantime, I'm going to go to court and I'm going to find the evidence that he's lying and get the evidence that the courts are fixing the cases. So I went to one courthouse And I asked the questions about how cases work their way through the system. You know, how do they get assigned to judges? How did my case move from one courthouse to another, right? And all of a
Mhm.
sudden, the clerk realized, this guy's asking some suspicious questions. And it didn't dawn on me that it's probably the clerks are involved in all of this. And I
Mm.
always mention Operation Greylord, because if you know about Operation Greylord in Cook County, Illinois, back in the 80s, 17 judges went to jail for fixing cases. And I forgot all about it, but their clerks were acting as bagmen for the bribe money. They would take the bribe money and then let the judge know, to fix the case. So it dawned on me afterwards that I'm talking to somebody who's probably a bagman for the judges. So she says, I'm not answering your questions. And I said, you can't do that. You're a public employee. I'm
Mhm.
asking for publicly, available information. And she just said, this conversation is over. So I told her, I said, you'll get my FOIA request in the mail next week. So I left voluntarily, peace, no problems. I made the mistake of telling her I was going to another courthouse
Mm.
and they'll answer the questions. So I went to that courthouse and I didn't know that she had emailed that clerk and told her I was coming. So she didn't get the email in time for me to stop me from asking the questions. This clerk actually answered all my questions and I left, no problems. I go out to my car, I call my client up, I tell her what's happening, not knowing that they're in the window. The security guards are watching me in my car on the phone. So I get ready to leave and I've lost my glasses. So I figured I left them back at the clerk's office. I try to get back into the courtroom and the security guard at the door says, you can't come in here. And I'm not even suspecting anything yet. I said, look, I just want you to get my glasses. Can you just
Mhm.
yell around the corner and tell the clerk to give me my glasses? So he says, is there any glass down there? He yells out. And I said, no, not glass, glasses, reading glasses.
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
says, no. So I left again with no incident. Now I'm in the car and I realize, did I just get kicked out of this courthouse, a public courthouse? So I decided I'm going to push the issue and go back in there and see what happens. So I went back in there. Before I got to the front door of the courthouse, it opens up. The head security guard is blocking my way. And he
Yeah.
says, you can't come in here. And I said, why not? This is a public courthouse. He goes, you're not coming in. So he started laughing at me. I says, what's your name? I said, what's your name? And he says, I'm not giving you my name. And I said, let me get my phone out. I want to tape this. So I pulled my phone out. And as I'm getting it out, he shuts the door in my face. And he's laughing at me. He says, here's the door. It's closing. And he closes it in my face. So I get on my phone and I call the local cops. And I say, this guy's preventing me from going into a public building.
Mhm.
So the cops come down. Now, they're all on his side. They go in, they talk to him, they come out, and I've got all of this on body cam. So there's 3 cops on the front steps and me and the security guard on the front steps of the courthouse, and they won't let me go in. And I'm saying, you're telling me I can't go into this courthouse. It's a public building. So finally, the security guard says, okay, you can go in. And they escorted me. They watched me. And I left. That night, I talked to a friend and I said, should I go back there and really push this? Because they don't have a right to do this.
Mhm. Mhm.
So he says, no, just let it go. And maybe I should have let it go, but I just couldn't. I woke up the next morning and says, I'm not going to let him get away with it. I went back down to the courthouse and I turned my phone on. I was going to tape this. I push the door open. I step into the courthouse. The guy jumps out of his chairs and says, you can't come in here. The head security guard comes running over. You can't come in here. And I'm filming it. And I'm saying, this is a public courthouse. You can't do this.
Mhm.
So they realized that one of them tried to grab the phone out of my hands. So I said, don't touch me. And he says, okay, you can come in if you stop videotaping.
Oh, but that's your First Amendment rights. You're allowed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I don't know that there's a sign on the wall that says no videotaping in the courthouse,
Mhm.
which
Mhm.
is unconstitutional. You might not be able to videotape in the courtroom, but I'm in the public area of the courthouse. So I sit down. They had to let me come in. You can tell they didn't want to. So I sit there and I'm waiting This is 9 o'clock in the morning. I'm waiting till 10 o'clock because they won't let me go into the courthouse until the trial starts. There's a trial going on. So they won't let me go into the courtroom. So I'm waiting and I'm waiting for about 45 minutes. And I'm sitting there minding my own business. There's nobody in the courthouse, nobody yet. All of a sudden, this big state trooper comes walking through the front door. And as soon as I saw him, he goes into the room with the head security guard. I realized, oh, this is what they're going to do. They're going to fire. They're going to have me arrested. So I pull out the phone again and I start videotaping. And sure as shit, the state trooper comes walking out of the room with the head security guard. He walks over. He says, "You can't videotape in the courthouse." And I said, "Okay, I'll leave my phone at the front desk. I just want to go up to the courtroom." The cop says, "Perfect." And I've got this on video. So he says, "Fine." I says, "Can I have your name?" He gives me his name, Officer Trooper Provost. And I've pointed the camera at the security guard who wouldn't give me his name the day before. I said, "What's your name now?" And he gives me his name. And his name is Prater, Scott Prater. I shut the phone off. The cop grabs the phone out of my hands and says, "You're out of here." So he escorts me to the front door. And I said, "Why are you kicking me out of here?" And he says, "Because the judge issued a no trespass order against you. And we're now enforcing it. You're being kicked off the property." All he had to do is say, "You can't videotape." That's all he had to say. I would have left. I would have went home. But when I left, I went all the way around the block and I'm heading home and I'm thinking, there's no trespass order. I never saw the judge. I have to have a hearing before you can kick me out. They're making this story up. So I turned my car around. I went back. I go and I called the local cops again. I said, "You need to come down here because I'm going into this courthouse." So a couple more cops come down. And they say, "All right, we'll find out what's going on." The cops go in, they talk to the head security guard and the trooper. They come back out, and I'm freezing. I'm across the street. And they come back over and say, "Yeah, the judge issued an order saying that you can't come in here anymore." And I said, "I don't believe it." I said, I want to see the copy of the order, or I want to talk to the judge. You can't. If you go in there, you're getting arrested. Oh, and by the way, I skipped over it, but the trooper told me that they were going to mail me the order. Remember, I said this to you earlier. When he was kicking me out, I said, "Why are you kicking me out?" He says, "There's a no trespass." I said, "I want to see the order. I want to see it." He says, "We'll mail it to you." And I said, "Well, how are you going to mail it to me if you don't know what my name is or my address?" So he took my name, and I knew he was lying because there is no trespass order. So I tell the local cops, I said, "I'm going back in there. If there's a no trespass order, I want to see it." And they said, "Well, you're going to get arrested." So I said, "Let's go for it." And all of this is on body cam. I walk into the courtroom. The trooper arrested me. I spent a couple hours in the state police barracks, the lockup there. Then I'm transferred over to the district courthouse, and I spent a couple hours in the lockup over there. And now I'm in the courtroom being arraigned for trespassing. So I pled not guilty, and I left. So I waited for the no trespass order. A month later, I go for the hearing to set up the trial date. And I say to the judge, "Your Honor, I still don't have the no trespass order. Where is it?" So the judge said to the prosecutor, "Why don't you give him the no trespass order?" He says, "Oh, it was issued verbally." And as soon as I heard that, I'm like, these guys are full of shit. And now it's verbal. All right. It's issued verbally. So we set a trial date, and you mentioned it was August 8th or 7th or something.
7th.
August 7th.
With Peter Doyle, Judge Doyle.
Right. So they changed it. It's not Peter Doyle. It's a different judge now.
Oh.
This is one of those things. There's always a switcheroo with judges, right?
Okay.
Maybe Peter Doyle was actually an honest judge, and they had to give it to this crooked judge. And her name is I can't remember the first name. Her name is Curran, Curran. So she's going to handle the trial. So I'm going to be a good lawyer here. And I realize if there's an order, it's got to be in writing. It's like a restraining order. You can't just issue a verbal restraining order.
Right.
You can't issue a verbal no trespass order, especially if it's public property. So I figured if they don't have it in writing, they have to put the judge on the stand to say he issued it. Otherwise, they don't have a case. It's all hearsay. You can't be putting a cop and a security guard on the stand saying, "Yeah, the judge issued this order verbally. That's hearsay. And any lawyer out there would know that's hearsay. And the cop saying that he heard this story from the security guard is double hearsay. In fact, the judge actually told the jury that the prosecutor's case was double hearsay. She said that to the jury. It's double hearsay. And that was, so I filed a motion to dismiss when I found out that they didn't have the judge on their witness list because they don't have a case without the judge testifying. So the judge refused to grant the motion to dismiss and put me on trial anyway. I was on trial for 2 days and I was looking at going to jail for 3 months. I was going to be in a prison in Massachusetts with all the criminals, the real ones. I never committed a crime before in my life, and I was looking at 3 months in this prison.
Oh.
So luckily, one of the jurors I talked to said that he didn't believe their story, and he held out, and they've deliberated for like 3-4 hours, whatever it was, and he held out, and he told me the rest of the jury was going to convict me. I would be in jail right now if I had been convicted, and I was an inch away from being convicted. So the day after I was found not liable, I went to the courthouse to make sure that there is no restraining order still outstanding, because even though I've been found not guilty of violating it, if it's out there and I try to go back to the court, they can arrest me again. It only took me 2 days to find out there is no order. The judge, who they mentioned his name, like I said, Jeffrey Karp, K-A-R-P.
Like a fish. That's
like, right, never issued this order. This whole thing was made up. And this trial, between the time, it took 4 months from the time of my arrest to go to trial. I'm still thinking to myself, how could the prosecutor not ask the judge for the trespass order? Put it in writing, and you can even backdate it. You can say, yeah, I issued an affidavit. I issued the order verbally. Why wouldn't the prosecutor do that? And then why would the judge put me in front of a jury and potentially send me to prison for 3 months, knowing that there's no evidence? I mean, any honest judge in that situation would say to the prosecutor, I have to dismiss the case because all you have is hearsay evidence. And I have to dismiss it. You can refile it when you come back with evidence. But why did the judge let me go on trial? And why did the prosecutor let me go on? They were trying to squeeze me into a plea deal before the trial. 18 months of probation. I got to give up my firearms, all kinds of stuff. I got to stay away from the courthouses. I'm like, I'm a lawyer. How am I going to stay away from the courthouses? This whole thing was made up to shut me up. And nobody's going to convince me of anything different. And anybody wants to call me a conspiracy theorist, I would love, and I'm going to give you my email again, anybody out there. It's GaryDolan76@gmail.com. And you explain to me why a prosecutor would put witnesses on the stand that can only give hearsay testimony. And why would a judge let him do that and put me in jeopardy of 3 months in prison if this wasn't fixed? The only question is, why would they do that? And I've been saying it's because they're trying to shut me up, because I'm asking too many questions and I'm trying to turn over all the rocks where all the slime is accumulated. I'm trying to expose all of these judges of being crooked and fixing cases. So now my Board of Bar Overseers trial. Currently, I'm waiting to be disbarred. I had a 6-day hearing with the Board of Bar Overseers for accusing these judges of being criminal, crooked, and accusing all of these lawyers and the judges of committing a fraud. Now, we did this earlier. I gotta tell you the story because it's really bizarre. This all started on January 17th, 2012. So if there's any lawyers out there, get your little legal pads and your pens out and pretend you're back in law school, because you won't see this fraud until I tell you. You'll think you see it, but you won't. It's such a clever fraud. So June 17th, January 17th, 2012,
Mhm.
it snowed overnight. There's 1 inch of slushy snow on the ground. A defendant comes in, one of many defendants, rolls into this woman's apartment complex, big apartment complex, and they're at the end of a 2-year contract for snow removal services. So these people come rolling in this plow truck, and there's 2 brothers in the plow truck that own the company, the landscaping company, and they've got an employee with them. So they roll into the parking lot. The younger brother and the employee jump out and they begin shoveling and salting walkways. While they're doing that, the older brother plows out an open area of the parking lot. When these procedures are done, and they've been doing this for at least 2 years now, the older brother pulls the truck over to a side, area, and he waits in the truck. The younger brother and the employee start knocking all the doors and ringing doorbells and telling everybody, move your cars to the open area so we can finish plowing the lot. My client knows this. She's been doing this for at least 2 years.
Mhm.
So she hears the plow truck outside. She starts getting ready before they knock on the door. The knock comes on the door. The guy tells her, go move your car. So she goes out. She moved her car. She moved her neighbor's car. On the way back in, she slipped and fell on the ground. And she
Oh.
herniated a disc in her back. And she's
Oh.
on the ground. She can't get up. The 2 brothers run over to her. They each grab her by an arm. They lift her off the ground, and they help her back into the apartment building. Right? That's January 17th. 6 weeks later, in February, she has a surgery. Her surgeon almost kills her on the operating table. She has to be airlifted to Boston to another hospital for emergency surgery to save her life. So she comes out of this with permanent nerve damage below the waist. She's had multiple operations since then. She requires a cane or a walker to get around.
Mhm.
And she's going to be treating for these injuries for the rest of her life.
Oh, geez.
Now, at this time, I'm a rookie lawyer. This is my first client. I never tried a case before. And she came to me because I just finished her divorce case, and she trusted me. Well, I've never tried a case before. I don't know anything about medical malpractice law.
Mhm.
So somebody tells me, take her to Lubin and Meyers in Boston. They're the biggest malpractice law firm on the East Coast. They specialize in medical malpractice. So I personally drove her down there, and I talked to attorney Andrew Myers and one of his associates, William Thompson. And they told me they'll take the medical malpractice case, you part of it, you take the slip and fall. And I said, okay, sounds good. I'm a rookie lawyer, so I think I've got a herniated disc to litigate here. No problem.
Mm.
Now, they may be the biggest law firm on the East Coast that does malpractice cases, but they're also the scummiest, sleaziest lawyers that you can imagine. They're the biggest, sleaziest law firm on the East Coast. So there's 2 cases filed. I file a slip and fall case in December of 2012. Lubin and Meyers files a malpractice case against the surgeon in December of 2013, almost exactly a year later.
Mhm.
Both of these cases are fixed, both of them. And I used to have a client that used to say, it's not what you can say in court, it's what you can prove in court. Well, I can prove they were both fixed. So the slip and fall case litigates for 3 years before going to trial. 6 months before the trial, the judge, and I'm gonna mention the lawyers' names and the judge because they're all scumbags.
Mhm.
I'm going up against Robert Pierce, who owns and runs Pierce and Mandel in Boston, the law firm Pierce and Mandel. He's the owner, operator, founder, right? Big cheese. The second lawyer, his name is Joseph Noon, and he owns and operates the law firm of Avery, Dooley, and Noon in Belmont, Massachusetts. And then the third lawyer is John Jarasak, and he's a big cheese at a national chain of law firms. So I'm a rookie lawyer who's never tried a case before, still working out of the trunk of my car. And these 3 guys are obviously the big guns, right, for their law firms.
Mhm.
So I didn't lose because I was out lawyered, and I didn't lose because I didn't have a good case. I lost because 6 months before the trial, the judge set up a conference to set the trial date. He postponed it twice to a date where he knew he was going to be on vacation because he can't be at the conference. He can't be the trial judge, and he can't be the conference judge. So he bails out, and we go to this conference. We prepare this document right here. I'm going to show it on your screen here if anybody wants to see it.
Yep.
This is what you file before a trial. It says joint pre-trial memorandum. And it's 7 pages long. It's got all the information about the case. So you can see where I filed it. I gave it to the clerk, and she stamped it, filed June 17th. And then she wrote number 22. This is the 22nd document that went in the file.
Mm-hmm.
In this document, it says they reserve the right to call an expert. Just says they reserve the right to call an expert. Well, you got to disclose your expert's name, address, medical opinion, qualifications. It just says they reserve the right to call one. So that document is in the case file. I go into the courtroom and I'm sitting there waiting for the lawyers to come in, waiting for the judge to come in. And the 3 lawyers come in. And one of them is holding this document. It looks identical, doesn't it?
Right.
Pre-trial memorandum, same verbiage, everything in this document is almost identical, except Attorney Robert Pierce had cut and pasted the name of an expert into this document without telling me. So where it used to say they reserve the right to call an expert, it now says they reserve the right to call an Michael Kennedy, MD. So I never saw this. I filed this one. This is the one we all agreed to. And he shows up with this one. He knows that I even gave him a copy of this one and said I had just filed it with the clerk.
Mm-hmm.
So he knows I'm unaware of this doctor's name in the document. So we're in the courtroom. They know Judge Welch isn't coming in. They know he's on vacation. This was set up so that they can scam whatever judge does come in. So the other judge walks in, and I've got a nice big long transcript of that conference with that judge. And his name is Kirpolani. Here's the conference transcript. And in this transcript, the very first page, the judge walks in, clerk calls the case, and Attorney Pierce yells back to me, "Hey, Gary, can you pass that document up here?" So I walk over to him to give him a copy of the original. The judge sits down. He says, "Attorney Robert Pierce, for one of the defendants, Your Honor, the parties have a pretrial conference memorandum prepared for the court." I hand him the document. He opens it up, fishes around with it, and then he hands the altered version to the judge.
Mm-hmm.
So he literally took the one that we all agreed to out of my hands and switched it with the one that had the doctor's name in it. This document is a forgery. In Massachusetts, what Pierce just did is he committed 2 crimes in Massachusetts, each one punishable by up to 10 years in state prison if he gets caught. But he didn't get caught.
Yeah.
He concealed the name from the judge. Now, the transcript shows all that. It's absolutely 100% proven that he switched the documents in the courtroom. The transcript shows later on the judge and the clerk are about to schedule a trial date. And the judge says that he estimates the trial is only going to take 2 to 3 days without experts.
Mm-hmm.
The clerk agrees with him and says it's going to go very fast. She starts looking for 3-day openings. She's got to block 3 days, 3 consecutive days for this trial. And they have to be consecutive. So any week that doesn't have 3 weeks in a row, she can't schedule it on that week. So she starts looking for dates. She's going to start calling out dates that all 4 lawyers can agree to. But before she can call out a single date, Attorney Robert Pierce, I call him Honest Bob because, he's a very honest guy. He blurts out at the last second, that the defendants will likely call an expert at the trial. He doesn't mention Dr. Kennedy's name. He just says they're likely going to call an expert. The clerk responds to his statement by saying, wait a minute, then it's a 5-day trial. So she schedules 5 days on the calendar for the first week in January of 2016. Now, would you agree with me? If you're in a courtroom and a clerk says the trial is going to go very fast, and the judge says that he estimates it's only going to take 2 to 3 days without experts testifying, and a lawyer says, we're likely going to bring an expert, and the clerk says, wait a minute, then it's a 5-day trial. Would you agree with me that she was probably just about to schedule a 3-day trial on the calendar?
Yeah.
And he got 5 days scheduled by saying he would likely bring an expert, right?
Mm-hmm.
I explained that to the Board of Bar Overseers hearing officers. The 3 hearing officers saw this and heard me say this. And the head hearing officer looks at me and says, oh, well, you can't prove that she was going to schedule 3 days. I'm stunned. This is the kind of shit that's been going on for 8 years. Every time I catch these guys lying, they change their story, and there'll be a judge that just lets them get away with it. And when they get caught blatantly lying and they can't change their story, there'll be a judge or a hearing officer with the Board of Bar Overseers making up some stupid excuse. In fact, before I forget, I actually showed this document that had the writing on the front page.
Mm-hmm.
That writing on the front page, it says, and I showed it to you earlier. I'll try to get it out there again. But this is the document they slipped into the file. And it says, the clerk wrote on it because the judge ordered them. Right after they said they were going to bring an expert, the judge says, well, if you're going to bring one, you got to disclose your expert by October 30th. And that's written on the front page of the document. Mm-hmm. Now, this document was going to be used on the morning of the trial to say they disclosed Dr. Kennedy at the conference when they didn't. That's what it was going to be used for. Mm-hmm. And they were all they have to do is change their story a little because the conference judge ordered them, issued another order to disclose. So you can't say you disclosed them at the conference, right? Mm-hmm. But there's no dates on this document. There's no court stamp that says June 17th. Nobody dated it. So they could say they filed this in late June, July, August, September, October. They could say they filed this before October 30th. This is what they were going to use it for on the morning of the trial as their disclosure. But when the judge showed up, he saw the writing on it. They didn't know that writing was there. This writing proves that they never disclosed it. This document is not a disclosure, or it wouldn't have that order to disclose written on it. It proves that the judge at the conference didn't see the name Dr. Kennedy in it, and it proves that it was filed at the conference because you can't file it after the conference. Why would the clerk write the order on it? It's a timestamp. Mm-hmm. It had to have been filed at the conference. So the judge sees that they're going to use it, and he implements their fraud without having them use it because he knew they were going to use it. So he saw that it was a forgery, and he helped them hide it. Mm-hmm. He didn't just help them hide it, but after he screwed me and my client out of a fair trial, mm-hmm. he took both of these documents that I've showed you, took them out of the case file, and hid them in the attic of the Newburyport courthouse in Massachusetts. He took them out of the physical file and hid them in the attic. And then right around this time, somebody was looking to impeach him because he's obviously a crooked judge on the bench for 20 years, probably fixing cases. And somebody was having a state rep begin impeachment proceedings. So right at this time, he took an early retirement. And I believe it was to avoid the impeachment and to avoid losing his pension.
Very convenient.
Right. And just before he retired, though, he hid the evidence that he screwed me and my clients in the attic of the courthouse. So when I filed an appeal, and this, I know it's confusing, but when I file an appeal, they know that the documents are missing. Mm-hmm. So they use this document on their appeal. It's mm-hmm. the forgery. It's got the doctor's name in it.
Oh.
Where's the writing? Where's the writing up here?
Right.
It's not there.
Right. The
Where's the
docket.
number?
Yeah, that docket number isn't on there.
Beautiful. The docket number isn't there. There's no
No.
signatures, no stamps, nothing on it. This is the first time I see the document, and I file an affidavit with the appeals court because my case against them for fraud was dismissed by a crooked judge. His name is Christopher Barry Smith. And I always say Smith because, I don't want to deprive him of, the use of his maiden name. So he dismissed the case. He fabricated grounds. He says this wasn't a fraud on the court by the lawyers. He says this was a fraud by their clients, by the defendants. Now, I don't know how he could come up and say that because there isn't a single allegation in that complaint that was made against their clients. Every allegation was made against the lawyers. The defendants in the slip and fall case didn't plant that document in the courtroom. They didn't trick a judge into scheduling 5 days on the calendar. Their clients didn't trick this judge into implementing a procedure that resulted in me not presenting any evidence to the jury. And they didn't use an altered version of the document to beat my appeal. So how is this a fraud by the defendants in the slip and fall case? The reason he did this is because if it's a fraud by the lawyers, there's no statute of limitation. There's no limitation period at all. I could bring this right now if I can find an honest judge, but I can't. If it's a fraud by the plaintiff or the defendant in a case, you only got 1 year to bring it. Otherwise, you lose your right to bring the case again. That's why he did it. So anyway, getting back to the original forgery, just to show you how crooked these three judges that I appealed to are, they saw this document, they saw the writing on it, they saw the document that was presented to the appeals court and beat my appeal that didn't have the writing on it, didn't have the docket number on it. There's the one that was missing. There's the one that they used, same document. And they said they disclosed Dr. Kennedy. I filed an affidavit with the appeals court saying I never saw this document before. It's a fake, and that both documents are missing from the court file. You would think that these three judges would do something, right? These three judges, their names are Mead, Sullivan, and Neiman, Neyman. And these three judges are just as crooked as everybody else involved in this. They saw the evidence. I showed them the transcript of how the document was switched in the courtroom, and they wrote a unanimous opinion without giving me a hearing, and they said they acknowledged that it was a forgery. They acknowledged that. But they made the argument for the lawyers that if I had been more diligent, I could have prevented them from planting it and committing this fraud.
So they re-victimized the victim.
Yeah. So my client got cheated out of a fair trial. She got cheated out of a fair appeal, 2 appeals actually. And I'm being disbarred for accusing the judges of covering up the fraud that the lawyers committed. And I was almost thrown in jail for all of this, for trying to expose the fraud. So they acknowledge it. And by the way, there's 4 appeals involved in these 2 cases, and every one of them was unanimously dismissed without published opinions and without hearings. And the reason these judges don't publish their opinions is because people would have access. It would be public record. When they're unpublished, nobody gets a chance to see what they're doing. They can do and say whatever they want, and as long as they don't publish the opinion, nobody sees it. So I went to the SJC with this, and I said, if you don't give me a hearing, 10 minutes, give me a 10-minute hearing, and let me explain the fraud, and let me explain something they've been covering up for 5 years. Don't give me a hearing. I'm going to take this case to federal court, and I'm going to accuse the SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, of fixing this case. Somebody said to me, you're going to get disbarred for doing that. And I use really colorful language. I use some language I wouldn't use around little kids. Well, they didn't. They dismissed my appeal. They wouldn't look at it. So I waited about 6 months. Nothing happened. So I took the case to federal court. I charged the SJC. I named them as a defendant, and I said they were fixing cases. I named Judge Welch because I have the evidence that he removed these documents from the case file and hid them in the attic. So I named him as a defendant, and then I named the 3 lawyers, like I did back in the state case. The case got assigned to Judge Patty B. Saris. Now, you don't know who that name is, but around that time, Judge Ketanji Jackson Brown, you know who she is, right? She's the first Black woman on the U.S. Supreme Court. And yeah, I know her name isn't Jackson Brown. I like to say Jackson Brown. Her name is really Brown Jackson. To me, it's funny. But anyway, so Justice Jackson Brown is now sitting on the Supreme Court. When she was given the job, she gave her little acceptance speech, and she mentioned Judge Patty B. Saris as one of her mentors coming up through this crooked court system. So when I saw her say that, I called my client. I said, my God, I think we got an honest judge, Patty B. Saris. This judge had set up a hearing. I filed a summary judgment motion on this case. They filed a motion to dismiss, and they filed a motion for sanctions and attorney fees against me. But the judge was going to hear the motions to dismiss in the summary judgment, and she puts the motion for sanctions and attorney's fees on the back burner. This was going to be the first time in 6 years that we were going to get a hearing. And I'm going to disclose something at the hearing that they've been hiding for 6 years. So I call my client. I say, get the champagne out. We're going to get a hearing, and you are definitely going to get a new trial when this judge hears what these guys have done. Judge Brown, 2 weeks before the hearing, less than 2 weeks before the hearing, discovers that she has a conflict of interest, and she voluntarily recuses herself. I've never heard of any judge recusing themselves voluntarily. You could find a judge that's heavily conflicted and say, hey, recuse yourself, and they won't. I've never heard of any judge doing it voluntarily. So she recuses herself, and the case has to be reassigned to another judge. And the judge's name is
go ahead.
The judge's name is Richard Stearns. Old crotchety guy. He looked like Jabba the Hutt on Star Wars. And we had a Zoom hearing. So this is what he did. This guy is so crooked. It's like he didn't even try to hide his corruption. If he was a crooked judge and he wanted to make it look good, he'd schedule another hearing, right? But he doesn't. He granted their motion to dismiss without a hearing. He dismissed my motion for summary judgment because he says it's moot because I just dismissed your case. And then he sets up a hearing date on the motion for sanctions and attorney's fees. I mean, this guy was sending me a message. I'm not even going to give you a chance that the other judge was going to give you. I'm going to screw you, and there's nothing you can do about it. So I asked him for a continuance, 1 month, to get a lawyer to represent me on this, motion for sanctions. And he wouldn't give it to me. He denied it. He says, I'll give you, I think he gave me 2 weeks. So I had to represent myself in this motion for sanctions and attorney's fees. It's a Zoom hearing. He ordered me to pay these 3 lawyers, Jarasak, Noon, and Pierce, $18,000 for their attorney's fees. So these 3 clowns got away with committing the most incredible fraud of all time. My client got cheated out of a fair trial. She's still treating for those injuries, never saw the inside of a courtroom. Well, actually she did, but she got cheated out of a fair trial. I got fined $18,000, and the Board of Bar Overseers has just concluded a 3-year investigation against me, and they're recommending my disbarment. That decision's coming down at any minute.
Ugh.
I appealed that $18,000 judgment against me to the Federal Appeals Court almost 3 years ago. It's still sitting there. No way that takes 3 years for these judges to make a ruling on it. They're sitting around and they're waiting for the Board of Bar Overseers to take my license away, and then they can justify upholding the $18,000 judgment against me.
But wouldn't there be a statutes of limitation on that?
No, it's in court. As long as you're in court, it's tolling the statute of limitations. And there is no statute of limitations. The court ordered me to pay them $18,000. So they can take as long as they want. But I've never heard of any case that took 3 years for an appeal decision to be made. In fact, they sent me a notice that said that my appeal was going to a 3-judge panel in the October session. Not October of this year, October of 2021. It was supposed to go to a panel and be decided on back in October of 2021. So what's the holdup? So if I'm a conspiracy theorist, tell me why this is taking so long. And I'm saying it's because they're waiting for the Board of Bar Overseers to officially disbar me, and then they'll make the decision, yep, we're going to charge you the $18,000 because you're obviously an unethical, corrupt, dishonest lawyer. See how that works?
Mm-hmm.
And on top of all that, I get arrested for trying to get evidence to prove this fraud, and I'm almost thrown in jail. So anyway, real quick, I can do this in 1 minute because we're running out of time.
Okay.
Forget everything I just told you. Forget it. Anybody out there listening to this, my trial, after 4 years after that slip and fall, the defendants, the two brothers, right? My client says she got the knock on the door. She went outside, moved her cars, and fell on the walkway. She says the walkway hadn't been shoveled. They forgot to shovel the walkway before knocking on her door and telling her to move the car. The two defendant brothers, the older brother testified that when he ran over and helped her off the ground, the walkway had been shoveled and salted. But where they picked her up, she was 10 feet off the walkway, taking a shortcut across the front lawn.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Now, somebody who's a legal genius might say, whoa, wait a minute, there's something wrong there.
Mm-hmm.
So 4 years later, we go to trial. Forget about the forgery they planted. They told the judge, if you bifurcate the trial, we won't have to call our experts. And they don't have any. And we just proved that this year. They never had any. But the judge says, oh, that sounds like a good idea. Shorten the trial from 5 days to 2. Now, when he said that, when they told him it would shorten it to 2 days, I said this to the SJC in one of my pleadings. I said he had a look on his face like he just pleasured himself under the bench. Because that bifurcation procedure, and I didn't say pleasure himself, I used something a little more colorful. But that bifurcation procedure was going to give him a 5-day weekend.
And
that's why
everybody likes that.
Right. So he thought, wow, this trial will be over Friday afternoon. I can hop on a plane and be in Florida in a couple hours. I suspect he probably has a place down there.
Go golfing.
Right. And because I lost in 2 days, he don't have to come back to work until the following Thursday. Right. Mm-hmm. So anyway, he goes ahead and he decides he's going to bifurcate it. He tricked me into bifurcating the trial between liability and damages. And I said, okay, I'll go along with that. Right. Now, any lawyers out there listening, that means I have to prove that the defendant had a duty to shovel the walkway. They failed to shovel the walkway, and their failure to shovel the walkway caused the herniated disc. Mm-hmm. After I made that agreement, he addresses a 60-person jury pool. He says it's a personal injury case, and it's the plaintiff's burden to prove that her injuries were caused by the defendant's breach of duty. None of the lawyers objected. We picked a jury. I made the same statement to the jury in my opening argument. She hurt her back when she fell on that walkway, and it wasn't shoveled. The lawyers didn't object. The next day, she takes the stand, and when she gets up to the part that she's coming back in on the unshoveled walkway and fell on the walkway, she said, I hurt my back. And all three of the lawyers now objected, and the judge says he sustains the objection without hesitating, without asking them what they're objecting to. And he tells me before I can present any evidence of her injuries to the jury, I have to first prove she fell on the walkway, because the defendants are claiming she's 10 feet off the walkway. So I did the best I could, and I think I was going to win. And he probably thought the same, because that's why he let the three lawyers tag team my client on cross-examination with questions and evidence about her arthritis. So I would challenge anybody out there listening to this, any lawyer, tell me what the relevance of my client's arthritis is to this trial. Why would he let that? And this was over my objections. Mm-hmm. Why would he allow that to go to the jury? Why would he let the jury see that? And I say the reason is because this poor woman is walking around in front of the jury for 2 days with a cane
Mhm.
that was prescribed by her doctor for her back injuries. We couldn't tell the jury that. But she was forced to tell the jury that she was once prescribed a walker for the arthritis in her ankles. So this jury had to have been thinking the cane was for arthritis. So they portrayed her to the jury as a fake who didn't have any injuries, and me
Oh.
as an ambulance chasing con artist who's put this woman on this fake on the stand. And here's the judge exposing the two of us. So we lost. But the incredible part of this story is people might say, well, yeah, they had this. First, they tricked the first judge into scheduling 5 days on the calendar by saying they would likely bring an expert. Then they tricked the judge at the trial saying, hey, you can shorten it from 5 days to 2 by avoiding the experts. But it's not the forgery that's the fraud. It's not all the lying that's a fraud. It's the fact that proving where this woman fell is completely irrelevant. It's an irrelevant fact. If you're a lawyer out there right now, you could think about this. Proving where she fell was no more relevant to this case, to this trial, than proving what color socks she was wearing. What if they had said, we got numerous experts, but if you limit the trial to proving what color socks she was wearing, we won't have to call our experts. And the judge said, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. She said she was wearing white socks. The defendant said she was wearing red. They noticed she was wearing red socks. What would you say if a judge allowed that? You would say, that's crazy, isn't it? Well, proving what color socks she was wearing is no less relevant than proving where she fell. Because remember, they testified that they knocked on her door. They were supposed to shovel her walkway before knocking on the door. So if they forgot to shovel the walkway and they knocked on her door, they put her outside. She would have never went outside had they not knocked on the door.
Right.
So if she did fall on the grass, well, what difference does it make where she fell now? There's no shoveled walkway. So I've been trying to explain this to all these judges and lawyers and the BBO now. What difference? You can get better traction walking on snow-covered grass. I would walk on the grass if it were me.
Right. If
you fell down on grass, it would hurt less than falling down on the asphalt sidewalk, wouldn't it?
Right.
So it would make perfect sense if she did that. Or maybe she thought she was on the walkway, but she can't tell where the walkway is because it's all covered in white snow.
Right. It wasn't shoveled.
So this judge screwed up this case so bad. Proving where she fell was completely irrelevant. And he gave such bad instructions that we don't know how the jury came up with their verdict, because he never asked the jury to determine whether the walkway had been shoveled or not. And he never asked them where she fell. So we don't know how this verdict came about. This woman was denied due process. So even if I can't prove that this was a fraud, she is entitled to a new trial right now because she never got due process at that trial. But I can't find an honest judge to look at this or even understand it. And I'm going to get disbarred for trying to explain it to everybody. So this is an offer I want to make to everybody watching this podcast. The last time I did this, I was watching, I got 830 views in a week. And I thought that was pretty good. I want to get you 1,000 views on this podcast because I'm offering anybody out there, any lawyer, anybody that could tell me how to get this case in front of an honest judge, because an honest judge will void that verdict. And everything that's happened since then, even my disbarment will have to be overturned if that verdict is void. And it is. If I can find an honest judge, and I can't. I asked Judge Stearns to do it and he refused to. And he can't do that. But if anybody out there listening can get this, help me get this in front of an honest judge, I will give you $10,000. I'm offering a $10,000 reward for anybody that can help me put this in front of an honest judge. And because I'm a lawyer and I'm not going to back, and I'm an honest person, that's probably why I'm getting disbarred. But I'll send Mary Ann Petrie a check for a cashier's check for 10 grand, and she can hold on to it. And if you could get me in front of an honest judge, Ms. Petrie will give you the $10,000 so that I can't back out on the deal. $10,000 for anybody that can help me get this case in front of an honest judge. So there's your podcast. But if you want to know real quick what Lubin and Meyers did to my client, it's even more outrageous. Lubin and Meyers assigned this case to Bill Thompson. He litigated the malpractice case against the surgeon for 4 years. They were 1 week away from going to trial. By the way, these are facts that I'm giving you. These aren't allegations anymore. These are facts. Bill Thompson was one of the lawyers who testified against me at my disbarment trial. And he actually admitted this under oath. 1 week before trial, he had my client go to his offices to discuss whether or not they should go to trial next week. You can't do that. You have to go to trial. During this meeting he had with her, he told her she's probably going to lose. She doesn't have a good case, and she's probably going to lose. Nothing wrong with that. Let your client know that they're going to lose next week. But then, and he testified to this under oath against me, he told her that if she chooses to go to trial and loses, she's going to have to pay him for their expert witness fees. So my client's got an 8th grade education and has no idea that he's just lied to her. No idea. She doesn't have to pay anybody. Lubin and Meyers took her case on a contingency fee agreement. They have to go to trial next week. And if they lose, she doesn't pay anything. That's what a contingency fee agreement is all about, right?
Right.
He admitted this under oath. That's a lie. And what he did is, after he told her that, he's giving her the option of going to trial or not. But he says, if you do, you're going to have to pay for the attorney, for the expert fees. And he says, and now she's crying and her daughter's with her. They're both crying because they're in a spot now, right? He says, if you sign this release and give us authorization to drop your case, you won't have to pay anybody. So he slides the release in front of her and she signed it. And he takes the release and he runs over to the defendant's lawyers first because they have to sign off on it. So they signed off on it, and he couldn't wait to get it to the courthouse before she could go to any other lawyer and tell them what happened. So her case was dismissed permanently because she thought she was going to lose and have to pay this guy a few $1,000s for his expert witness fees. I can't even believe that. He actually, when I sued Lubin and Meyers for fraud, the court threw the case out, threw it out. And this guy just admitted to the allegations that we were accusing of. And by the way, in Massachusetts, there's no statute of limitation involved here because it's a 3-year statute of limitations. But if a defendant hides your cause of action from you, the statute of limitation is told until you find out that you've been defrauded. Well, we just found out in March that he lied to her. So the statute of limitations doesn't run on this case till March of 2025 or 26 even, right? So wait a minute, this is the 24th, 25th, it's the 27th. Yeah. We got until March of 27 to file a case. And again, the reason I don't file it now is because I know the courts are going to fix it. And again, the same $10,000 reward is offered. Anybody that can help me get this case in front of an honest judge, it's $10,000, and I'll give it to you. 10 grand just to put me in front of an honest judge, because both of these verdicts are void. They're both void. The verdict is void from the trial, and the judgment to dismiss it is also void. And there's no limitation period on either one of these cases until March of 27 on the malpractice case against Lubin and Meyers. But I can't file it. Not only because they're going to disbar me, so I can't file it. I'm not a lawyer anymore. And she won't be able to file it because they're going to fix it again.
Right.
So, again, I had that client that used to love to say, it's not what you can prove in court. I mean, say in court, it's what you can prove. I could prove, I got a mountain of evidence to prove everything that I'm saying, to prove every one of these judges involved. That's it. Bye. And I gotta read that. I have to read that because somebody has to start taking the bull by the horns and start really exposing what's going on in these systems. And if anybody doesn't believe that this story and my story are legit, go do some research, go read about Operation Greylord, and you'll see that it's not just possible that there are this many corrupt systems in this country, but it's probable because these judges, it's the only profession that has no oversight.
Right.
Every other profession, if you own a business, you got the Better Business Bureau. If you're a sports athlete, you have mandatory drug testing and they can throw you out, you know, and all these other things, right?
Nurses,
Doctors, nurses, right?
Yeah.
But judges, where's your oversight? When you find a bunch of crooked judges, or even one, where do you go? Every state has this stupid, you know, like the Massachusetts, the Commission on Judicial Conduct. They won't look at it. They just say, well, the judge made a bad decision. We can't do anything about it. They'll only look into a judge if he swears at me or if he uses the N-word. That's the only time they'll take action. If he discriminates against somebody, they're not going to kick him off the bench. They never will. And the CJC is made up of judges. The SJC, the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, is made up of judges. I'm accusing them of fixing cases. Where do I bring that accusation? If you go on the Board of Bar Overseers website, it says the Bar Council and the Board of Bar Overseers were set up in 1974 by the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts to be independent agencies entrusted to look into complaints against lawyers in Massachusetts. Great, except that the Bar Council works for the Board of Bar Overseers, and the Board of Bar Overseers actually works directly for the SJC. How is that an independent agency? If they're working for the judges I'm accusing of being crooked, and the judges said, go after him, go take his license, how is that an independent investigation? And where do I turn when they disbar me? Who am I going to go to? Another judge?
Yeah. This is so bad.
So I know the story is all confusing, but again, I want to make sure all your viewers, anybody out there, my email is garydolan76@gmail.com, and I will put up a $100,000 cashier's check, and it will be waiting for you if you could tell me how to get either one of these cases in front of an honest judge. And it's got to be a legitimate way to do it. I mean, I don't want somebody saying, well, just go to the judge and put a gun to his head. It's got to be a legal way to do it. Believe me, I'd like to put a gun to somebody's head. Oh, I shouldn't say that because I'll probably get arrested for threatening people. Well, the only threat I'm going to make, I'll throw some eggs at their houses at Halloween. That's what I'll do.
Or toilet paper. Remember when we were in high school, we toilet papered everybody's houses.
You know, so I never did that though.
I didn't either. I didn't. Other people did. I didn't do it.
I threw eggs at cars and houses and stuff. And I should admit that I was, you know, it's you're young. You don't understand that you're causing problems for other people.
Your brain isn't fully developed yet.
Exactly. But you know, I'm not going to do anything other than legal remedies. And what's happened to me, the $18,000 judgment, I'm going to sue. I am definitely going to find a lawyer if I can. If you're out there and you see this, I've got a false arrest claim here. It's a slam dunk because they arrested me for violating a no trespass order that doesn't exist. And they knew it. The cop and the security guard made up this story and put me on trial, and I almost went to jail for it. So this is a false arrest case that is literally a slam dunk. So if there's a lawyer out there that would like to represent me in that case, call me up, email me, garydolan76@gmail.com. And it's $10,000 for anybody that can get my two cases in front of, or either one of them, in front of an honest judge. Somebody's got to expose this corruption. And if
Right.
I have to go to the Supreme Court of the United States, Maureen Meadows tells me, she goes, that's not going to do you any good because they're all just as crooked. And I fear
Mm.
that she may be right. Every judge in Massachusetts, and I'm not going to say every judge is crooked because there might be some honest judges out there,
Mhm.
but they're not on the appeals court in Massachusetts, because I sent letters to all of those judges who weren't involved in this case. And I said, please look at this case, personal letters to each judge that wasn't involved. I said, please look into this, do something about this. If you care about your oath, look into this case and do something. And
Right.
none of them did. None of them lifted a
Well,
finger.
they have judicial canons they should be following.
Yeah, that's a joke. But, I'm an honest person. And
Right.
if I was a judge and an appellate court judge making good money, and I'm on the appeals court, and you can't get rid of me for anything, you have to impeach me. It's not like the SJC can fire me because they don't like me.
Mhm.
If somebody told me what was happening, I would stand up and do something. I would say, my God, we need to look into this.
Oh,
And if nobody would back me up on it, I would resign. I'd go back to private practice, and it would be published in a newspaper. A judge is retiring because he's saying that the system is corrupt, and I'm not going to be part of it.
mhm.
That's how Operation Greylord got started, when somebody came forward. Nothing's going to happen until somebody. So I got less respect for the judges who aren't involved, because they're sitting back and they're letting other judges fix cases, and they
Mhm.
have the power to do something, but they just want to keep their, high paying cushy jobs. They're more scum than the
Right.
lawyers, the judges and the lawyers who are fixing cases. If you're standing by watching it, I got less respect for you.
Exactly. I agree. I'm so glad you came on for this update.
Yeah, I'm so glad I'm not in jail. Remember, that's what I said to you.
Yeah, right,
I
right.
could literally be doing this from the prison
Oh,
if it wasn't for one honest juror that said, I am not voting to convict. And that's what he told me. He said the rest of them were going to convict you. And I
oh.
held out, and they realized, okay, we're not getting anywhere. So they wanted to go home because it was like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And they said, okay, not guilty.
Mhm, mhm. Oh. Well,
But
I'm glad someone did the right thing.
yeah, but what would have happened? Would this guy's conviction held out if the rest of the jury said to him, listen, we're going to come back tomorrow and we're going to deliberate again? You think maybe he might say, I've already wasted 2 days out of work on this, and now I got to come back again tomorrow? You think he would have held out again?
I hope so, because I know I would have dug my heels in.
I would have stayed there a
Yeah,
month.
yeah.
Just like what happened at that big case in Massachusetts about the murder case.
Mhm.
I can't even think of her name now. And it looks like the cops actually framed her for murdering her cop husband.
Mhm.
And the jury held out for days deliberating. The judge kept telling him, go back, keep deliberating, keep deliberating. And finally they said, mistrial. And now the prosecution is thinking about retrying it again.
Ugh. At taxpayers' expense.
Yeah.
Ugh.
So the system is corrupt,
Mhm.
and you're going to lose. But you won't lose as long as you have an honest jury between you and the judge. If
Mhm.
it wasn't for an honest juror, I would be in jail right now. And there's nothing I can do about it. I mean, I would appeal it and I would say, hey, I got a great appeal here. I'm in jail for committing a crime that was never committed. There was no trespass order issued against me, but I'm in jail.
Mhm.
Well, it would take more than 3 months to get my appeal looked at. I'd be out of jail by the time they overturn the conviction.
Right, right.
This is the kind of shit that's been going on all over the country, I think. I don't
Oh,
think
yeah.
when this started, I thought maybe Judge Welch is just a dishonest judge and the appeals court will overturn him. And then it just started snowballing and snowballing. And now the Board of Bar Overseers is involved in it. Can you imagine? All of these lawyers involved in this testified against me. You got a lawyer, Robert Pierce, committed 2 crimes punishable by up to 20 years in state prison, and he's the board of bar overseer star witness against me. He's still out there probably scamming people and screwing people out of their rights. And he's making tons of money. How much money have these lawyers made over the last 8 years? And my career is destroyed.
Ugh.
I mean, I got to pay them $18,000 for screwing me and my client.
And in the end, God will deal with them.
I don't know. We talked about that last time. And I don't know if I told you, but the first time I appealed to the SJC, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Judicial Court of Massachusetts, right after he screwed him and the other 6 dwarfs, after he screwed us, he had a heart attack and died.
Well, God.
And you said that. And you want to know something? I hope, and his name is Harry Gant. I'm not sure about his first name, but his last name is Gant. He's the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court for years in Massachusetts, and he died of a heart attack right after he screwed me and my client. And I got to tell you, like we talked before, I'm not religious, but I was brought up to be a Christian and the golden rule, but I don't care. The world is less one asshole, one crooked judge. And I hope this guy, and if there is a hell, he's down there right now and he's
there
burning.
is. Yes, God created the heavens and hell. And he created hell for a purpose.
Well, a crooked judge has got a special place waiting for them.
Oh,
they better get their asbestos underwear and union suits together, because that's where they're going.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Hey, God's creative. Let God handle it. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. And he gets them every time.
I don't know. I'd rather put my trust in Luca Brasi.
Yes, but remember, he's swimming with the fishes, remember?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, hey, don't jump off, okay?
Oh, I'm not.
Okay, Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and other platforms I don't know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this going. I totally thank you, Attorney Gary Dolan, for speaking out for the face and the sake of justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all you're doing and trying to do. I don't know if we're going to make a difference, but we'll keep trying.
Thank you so much.